Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today for this explainer. We're going to be breaking down some incredibly fascinating source material about a completely forgotten civilization. I mean, this is a story that literally flips everything we thought we knew about human history right on its head. So let's jump right into it, because today we are looking at the lost continent of Mu. According to the texts, this was an enormous landmass stretching across the Pacific Ocean, dwarfing South America in size more than 50,000 years ago.
64 million. Just let that number sink in for a second. According to the source texts we're exploring today, that is the exact number of people who called this vast continent home. They supposedly built 7 major cities, mastered these mind-bending technologies we still can't explain today, and then, in a single catastrophic night, all 64 million of them, along with their entire continent, just vanished. Poof, gone.
And really, that brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? Where did man first appear? Now, mainstream science has its answers for sure, but the astonishing claim we're examining today suggests that the roots of all humanity don't actually trace back to multiple different cradles of civilization scattered around the globe. No, the claim is that they trace back to this single, highly advanced, lost continent.
Section 1. James Churchward's Evidence. Uncovering the Naga Maya Secrets.
Okay, so to really understand this theory, we have to look at the guy who dared to challenge the entire scientific consensus of the 19th century, a British writer and former soldier named James Churchward. It all kicked off in the 1870s while Churchward was serving in the military in India. He ended up befriending this highly respected Indian monk who eventually showed him a closely guarded secret. We're talking ancient sun-baked clay tablets. The monk actually taught Churchward how to read the dead language inscribed on them, a language known as Naga Maya. Then, decades later, in 1921, an archaeologist named William Niven discovers over 100 incredibly complex tablets over in Mexico, and nobody could read them except Churchward. He translated them, claiming they were written by the descendants of Mu. All of this culminated in 1926 when he published his explosive book, The Lost Continent of Mu.
Now, Churchward didn't just rely on translations. He pointed to what's essentially a giant global puzzle, a collection of identical architectural and cultural markers popping up across completely disconnected ancient societies. Like, how in the world do we have highly advanced pyramids in Egypt, Mexico, China, and Peru? Why does the sacred flower of life symbol appear in Egyptian temples, the Chinese Forbidden City, in Indian caves? And why do Sumerian, Greek, and Native American traditions all share identical Great Flood myths? Well, Churchward argued that there's no way these are just coincidences. He claimed they are the inherited fingerprints of a single mother culture, Mu.
And beyond those shared myths, Churchward pointed to actual physical remnants supposedly left behind. The source material highlights unexplainable underwater Pacific ruins and, probably most famously, the Moai statues of Easter Island. You know the ones. When the Rapa Nui people were asked what inspired these massive, incredibly engineered stone figures, they simply said they were built to honor their ancient ancestors. So Churchward asks, what if those ancestors were actually the survivors of Mu?
Section 2. Life in the Crystal City. A sensory tour of Mu.
I want to shift gears here for a minute and invite you on a little thought experiment. Just imagine waking up 50,000 years ago in this lost world. What would you actually see around you? What would you feel? Well, first off, you'd meet the locals, known as the Na'akal. The texts describe them as a predominantly black or deep mahogany-skinned civilization. But honestly, the very first thing you'd notice is their sheer size. Standing next to them, you would literally feel like a toddler, because the Na'akal reportedly stood anywhere from 12 to 15 feet tall. With broad features and deep pronounced lower jaws, visiting this civilization would almost feel like stepping into a totally non-human world.
Walking through their city, you'd probably be pretty baffled by the architecture. The buildings have no seams, no joints, no rough edges whatsoever. The texts claim they utilized this impossible engineering process. They didn't use hammers, they didn't use chisels. Instead, they applied specific vibrational frequencies directly to volcanic stone, softening its density until it was basically like clay. They'd mold it perfectly by hand and then just allow it to harden permanently. They were manipulating the actual molecular structure of living stone.
So, the absolutely crucial point to take away here is how this total mastery of energy completely redefined their society, especially in areas like healthcare. Think about how we do medicine today, right? Sterile white walls, harsh fluorescent lights, blood tests, chemical prescriptions. Contrast that with Mamala's approach. When you got sick, you didn't go to a clinic, you went to the Crystal Temple. This was a massive structure built around a gigantic quartz crystal that drew electromagnetic currents right up from the Earth's core. The walls literally pulsed with violet and blue light. The healers there didn't run a blood test. They read your energy fields to find blockages and treated you using targeted sound frequencies and spiritual healing. Body, mind, and soul, it was all treated as one connected system. And that deep harmony extended right into their everyday life. The utopian daily routine of an average citizen in Mur was just incredible. Because their houses were made of that frequency-treated stone, the walls naturally channeled the Earth's energies to cool the house during hot days and warm it during cold nights, zero fuel required. Even their food was grown in soil enhanced by frequencies, basically acting as active medicine to give them extreme longevity. Plus, there was no grinding 9 to 5 just to pay rent. Work was considered a sacred, soul-driven service. You were guided from childhood to find your true purpose, maybe as a crystal technician, farmer, or an artist. And because the civilization's massive abundance was shared completely equally, things like poverty, homelessness, and greed, they just simply did not exist.
Section 3. Technologies of the Naacal, Beyond Modern Science.
Now, as peaceful and spiritual as they were, do not make the mistake of thinking they were primitive. The source texts detail these mind-bending, sci-fi-esque technological advancements that kind of make our modern world look like the Stone Age. For instance, the Naacal didn't walk everywhere despite being giants. They used transportation pods that hovered silently just a few feet above the ground. No wheels, no internal combustion engines, and absolutely zero pollution. How? By using finely tuned crystal arrays, they created fields that perfectly counteracted the Earth's gravitational pull. It was a 100% eco-friendly mastery of the planet's natural forces.
Actually, scratch that. They didn't even always need vehicles. I love this quote from the source material. It says, "By raising their vibrational frequency, experienced practitioners could disappear from one place and appear in another." Yeah, we're talking about near instantaneous teleportation across hundreds of miles, achieved purely through the mastery of internal and external vibrational frequencies. Mind-blowing, right? Let me ask you something. Where is your cell phone right now? Probably in your hand or your pocket, right? Well, in Mu, you wouldn't need it. While our modern communication relies on physical devices and texting, in Mu, communication was entirely telepathic. From childhood, the Naalakal were trained to project and receive thoughts. The texts describe a scenario where two Naalakal are standing hundreds of feet apart. One projects a complex mathematical equation from their mind, and the other receives it and solves it instantly without a single spoken word. Because of this open mental connection, lying was practically impossible. Deep empathy was just the societal norm, because you could literally feel exactly what others were feeling. This total mastery over energy is what allowed them to expand their global footprint. The Naacal weren't just isolated on their continent, they were the ultimate global missionaries. They mapped the entire world not by using compasses, but by physically reading the Earth's energetic grid. They sailed the oceans in these magnificent ships, powered by self-sustaining crystal energy systems. But here's the coolest part. Their greatest export wasn't goods or natural resources, it was knowledge. The source material claims they traveled out to Egypt, India, China, and the Americas, purposefully seeding those ancient cultures with the foundational building blocks of agriculture, astronomy, and spiritual architecture. Section 4. The fall of a great civilization, when harmony broke. So with all that perfection, what happened? How does a utopian society of 64 million highly advanced, telepathic giants just vanish? Well, the tone of the ancient text dramatically shifts here, offering us a pretty chilling cautionary tale. The harmony eventually broke down from within. A faction emerged among the Naacal that started to question their egalitarian ways. They started asking, why are we sharing power equally? Why shouldn't the strongest rule? And this greed corrupted their science. They began pushing those crystal technologies way past their safe limits. Frequencies that were originally meant for healing and building were weaponized into sonic weapons capable of shattering stone and even stopping human hearts. The spiritual masters begged them to stop, warning, "The Earth itself is alive, you are pushing too hard." But tragically, those warnings were completely ignored. And the planet reacted. The text described these terrifying, apocalyptic signs as the living Earth sought to violently correct the massive energetic imbalance caused by the Naacal's hubris. The ground literally tore open with massive earthquakes. Long-dormant volcanoes roared back to life, and relentless tsunamis began to batter the shores. The Masters gave one final, desperate warning that the covenant with the planet was broken. A few wise survivors listened, boarding ships to flee, eventually seeding the other ancient cultures we know today. But most of them stayed behind. Which brings us to this final, absolutely devastating number, 12,000. According to Churchward's translations of those ancient tablets, 12,000 years ago, the oceans rose up in a single night of unimaginable destruction. The entire continent of Mu, with its glowing crystal temples, its floating transport pods, and its 64 million inhabitants, sank forever beneath the deep waves of the Pacific Ocean.
And that leaves us with a really profound and lingering question to end our explainer today. Are we repeating the same mistakes with nature today? I mean, when we look around at our own rapidly advancing technology, our environmental struggles, and our deep global divisions, the story of Mu, whether you view it as literal hidden history or just a brilliant ancient allegory, feels incredibly relevant to us right now. Are we pushing our own planet's limits a little too far? Well, I'll let you be the judge of that. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this fascinating source material today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.